Hello YouTube, this is Wheelchair21 coming at you with Gundam Week Day 3 featuring G Gundam. Now, this special rolling review is featured upon G Gundam's Hyper Maxter and Hyper Rose Gundam. Now, in the finals of the Gundam Fight tournament, the 13th Gundam Fight tournament, or the 14th, I always forget, Chibodee and George were forced to work together to take on the Grand Gundam, allowing Domo and Kashu to go towards and defeat the Dark Gundam. Now, these hyper modes were achieved by battling Domon in various semifinal matches in the Gundam Fight tournament, in which they unlocked it through their bravery and skill and their competitive drive to not be upset by Domon's increasing powers. Now, like the Shining Gundam and all the other hyper modes throughout the series, they're pretty much painted gold, have black trimming, and pretty much any, any surface that is going to glisten of maybe a yellow color or whatever was their eyes turns to a jade green to make this wonderful imperialistic badass Super Saiyan like status for the Super Robot Fighting series. Now, much like their original forms, they come with the same pieces like the more beefy macho chest plate to allow Chibodee to go into his boxing mode, his surfboard shield, his Desperado pistols, which he has 2 of them, and George's 3 rose bits. He had about 24, and he comes with these 3 wonderful, beautiful rose bit funnels to be similar to the Sazabi's regular funnel system. It's an actually badass style because when using them, he used the Rose Hurricane attack, and it was pretty bitchin'. Along with that, he came with this little rapier plastic fencing piece, which, when pulled off, it actually goes under his cape to reveal where his saber would go with its sheath. And both sides actually pull back to release its funnels, because underneath there are actual little jets in here that released all the rose bits. And this would plug in as so. Now, since their points of accessories are the same, their points of articulation, however, also meet that of their original molds. Whereas with George, because of his shield or his, royal gown, cape, he really has limited not accessory, but points of articulation for his left arm, since they don't really have much give to let his left arm come out. Which, as much, he was like a matador, a Spanish imperial officer, so he used mostly his right arm, where it had the basic bicep joint, which is a little stiff for some reason, so I'm guessing it might break if I try to rotate it. Elbow joint, wrist joint, and he had the basic hip, the basic knee, and the ankle joints of most Gundam figures, along with the articulation in the waist, and that in the head, where his head could go 360. And he had this core fighter, which, as like all mobile suits in this series, fall out. Now, with the Maxter Gundam, if you've seen the previous video in Gundam Week, he had the hip, the knee, the actual ankle, along with the waist, the elbow, bicep, and the wrist, along with the head. Now, along with that, as stated, he had the original boxing ability where his little knuckle pieces would come out to cover his fists, allowing him to use his meteor punch, which they pop off at times since they're on a weird peg system. And he had his basic boxing gloves, which his shoulder pads would come off to encase his fists and allow him to actually use the full potential of his meteor punch attacks. Now, overall, with these two figures. They're great to have. I love the Hyperform because of how beautiful the Bandai gold plastic and paint looks, and actually just is overwhelmingly amazing for these early 2000 toys. Along with that, though, however, I don't like, though, that over time, since this is the basic original types of Bandai figures, their joints are on these weird swivel joints, and they tend to dry out and crack like most regular figures of the line, and get loose, tight, or stiffen. The original color designs are amazing. They're the basic, colors of a Gundam, usually white, blue, and red, or with Maxter, who's based upon Heavy Arms Gundam of Gundam Wing. Now, overall, these are great figures to own. They were very cheap and affordable back in the early 2000s. Now, buying the actual Japanese version of the MSIAs, they're actually a little bit more expensive, because usually the common sense is, if it's the original product, it's automatically worth more money. And the fact that they're the Hyperforms instantaneously increases the price, because they are well wanted and sought after by the fans. Personally, I'm glad I got all 5 of the original guys. And I believe they're probably some of the best figures in the line, next to their original forms. I do say, though, that they do come with usually few or the same amount of accessories, and they are still built on the same system, so you have no problems, posing and playing with them, as such. Out of the two, though, I recommend Maxter Gundam because, 1, it's America, and he's a boxer, and 2, he actually has a shit ton of articulation. With Rose Gundam, he sadly doesn't have much because his shoulder pads kind of block his arms, and his gown for his waist guard is a pain in the ass. Along with that, because of how his boots are formed, his ankle joints are limited. Plus, he's France. He's Neo-France. And not many people like the French for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it's because of Quebec. I think Quebec gives them a bad name. However that may be, cool characters from a great show, and I recommend you watch it. Now, for those of you who probably are coming into this video, the last 2 days of this Gundam week were the Shining Gundam, regular Maxter, and Dragon in it within the past 2 days. Up next, we'll have Hyper Dragon and Hyper Bolt. And on the last day, Master Gundam, Burning Gundam, and Fun Psyche. Anyways, you can catch all my videos here on my channel, or on HeroTaku.com. You can also follow me here on YouTube and Twitter at Wheelchair21. Instagram is Taja_Doyle, and I recommend for you to check out all my associates here on YouTube and at HeroTaku.com, along with checking out HeroTaku.com's Twitter, which is HeroTaku.com, and checking out our plentiful podcasts provided by Raijo Nihon, such as Morphin Bracers, Anisatsu Podcast, Unichronicles, Ultracast, WRW, and much, much more. And we'll see you next time.